You guys ever been to Mexico? I haven't gone since I was a kid, so it might be much different now than what I remember it as. But over there, it's basically just Fallout. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating a bit. But let's get into why I think Fallout in Mexico would slap pretty damn hard.
¡Éntrenle, muchachos! Y Matilde la chapeada nada más se carcajeó. Cuando el pobre agonizaba, el charrasca lo arrastró.
First off, Mexico is a large country, and that size brings a lot of geographical variety. Up north, you've got the harsh, sun-scorched deserts. Think the Mojave Wasteland, but with its own unique ecosystem and geographic identity. And in the south, you have giant jungles and rainforests. Literal ancient indigenous ruins poking out from the dense foliage. A majority of them still undiscovered to this day. Ooh, and the creatures would be sick. Giant snakes, giant tarantulas with a bunch of babies on its back. You know, spiders are mad underutilized in post-apocalyptic games. Metro is the only one I can think of that uses them really well. There's so much you can do with spider nests and environmental storytelling, but I know a portion of my audience are arachnophobes, so I'll move on, for your sake. You bigots. Alright, but what about giant axolotls, huh? Oh wait, they already used that in the show. Wait a second, why the hell was there an axolotl monster in the Fallout show when they are sure as hell not native to fucking Los Angeles? The moment those poor axolotls would step foot into the LA River, they'd be petrified to stone. Also, why does LA look like a rainforest? The water looks like blue raspberry Kool-Aid. Did the nukes somehow fix the California drought? The scene would make a lot more sense in the tropical areas of Mexico, where you would expect to find this type of climate and ecosystem, but whatever. While the aesthetics of the southern parts of Mexico would be visually cool, I don't think it's the best fit for Fallout. Rather, I think the northern parts of Mexico are perfect for a return to Fallout's roots. Mexico's northern regions, mostly harsh desert landscapes, offer a natural continuation of a core thematic element that has always underpinned the post-apocalyptic genre: the spirit of the wild wasteland. It has always been confusing to me when people levy criticism of New Vegas by calling it the yeehaw, rude and tootin' Fallout, as if their understanding of Western themes is limited to cowboys and oversized jug hats swinging six-shooters around. Have these people not seen the Dollars trilogy? Played Red Dead? Watched Mad Max? Like, come on, think about it. What are the hallmarks of a Western, specifically during the spaghetti era? Lone wanderers struggling for survival in a brutal, unforgiving environment? A desperation for basic resources? Sparse, isolated settlements carving out an existence against the rough frontier? Hungry raider gangs circling like buzzards? Power struggles between rivaling factions? A tension between nascent attempts at order and the ever-present threat of chaos? All themes that were also present in the Mexican frontier, and that is exactly why Mexico would be a perfect return to form for Fallout, even more than something like Fallout London. Mexico, particularly in its more rural and underserved regions, is essentially the wasteland, just without all the radioactive abominations. Unless you're counting the cryptids, then there's plenty of abominations to find there. But if that's the only thing you need to add to make Mexico a truly post-apocalyptic setting, I'd say you're already about 75% the way there. In the 1950s, the majority of the Mexican countryside struggled with basic infrastructure, while the federal government, through entities like El Comisión Federal de Electricidad, established back in the 1930s, was working on expanding electrification. Its primary focus, and the focus of private companies before it, was on densely populated urban areas and industrial centers. Rural areas were simply not considered profitable enough for widespread investment. This also meant money was often scarce in these isolated communities. Many relied heavily on a mix of a limited cash economy and, more crucially, bartering goods and services with vecinos. If you had a surplus of corn, you might trade it for a neighbor's beans or for a service like help with a repair. Access to larger markets was severely limited by poor roads and inadequate transportation. Access to clean running water inside the home was almost non-existent. People typically got their drinking water from groundwater wells, natural springs, or rivers. This water then had to be physically hauled, bucket by bucket, back to the house. And if you had the misfortune of setting up a groundwater pump only for the faucet to trickle out sand, then you better get your ass to walking. See if the neighbors who do have water are willing to spare some. The Wild West, and by extension, the wasteland, at their core, are about survival in a harsh, untamed land. They are about small, isolated communities trying to carve out an existence, often at war with each other, with nature, or with whatever opportunistic gangs rolled through. You're dealing with scarcity, with the breakdown of established order, and with people trying to pacify that chaos or just endure in the wasteland. These same rural areas of Mexico also struggled with an absence of unified authority, especially when it came to effective policing or federal enforcement. Through the 19th and early 20th centuries, large swaths of the country were simply beyond the consistent reach of urban control centers. After the Mexican Revolution, the new political order began to take shape under what would become the Institutional Revolutionary Party. But even as the PRI worked to centralize authority through the 1930s and 40s, its influence often faded the farther one traveled from the capital. Rural police forces were small, under-resourced, and widely viewed with suspicion. The federal judicial police rarely made it to isolated ranches or mountain towns. The older rural guardians was seen less as a peacekeeping force and more as a tool of repression. And where law enforcement did exist, corruption frequently hollowed it out from the inside. In many cases, people living in rural communities learned not to expect protection from the government at all. I mean, that's kind of still the case today. This left power vacuums that were filled not by legitimate governance, but by whomever could assert control through force, influence, or community ties. In the 1950s, this often meant local strongmen who would establish and rule over certain territories, sometimes offering a semblance of order and protection, sometimes exploiting their own people. Sound familiar?
Get your butt in here and sit down. We got some business to discuss.
It also meant the rise of organized crime families, which would later become the infamous militarized cartels of our modern day. Back then, these groups were often more akin to family-run smuggling operations, focused on stuff like marijuana and opium for the US market, rather than heavily armed organizations they would later become. They still often relied on violence to enforce territory and collect debts. Coupled with the systemic weakness of local and federal authority, it laid the groundwork for a future where these cartels would function as an alternate, often more effective form of governance in the remote countryside. So, you have pockets of humanity in Mexico's countryside, largely self-sufficient, but also deeply interdependent, surviving the harsh Mexican desert. Throw in some mutated freaks, some interesting characterization to the cartels, interesting characterization to the survivors, and you have yourself the foundations of a Fallout setting. And that's just the countryside. A Fallout in Mexico could also allow you to explore the urban cities, similar to how Fallout 1 and 2 did. And the city that I think has the most potential for a post-apocalyptic setting is none other than El DF, otherwise known as Mexico City. In the 1950s, millions of rural immigrants flocked to this rapidly modernizing metropolis, which simultaneously embraced new infrastructure and struggled under the immense pressure of its expanding population. Mexico City was built directly atop Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital originally constructed on Lake Texcoco. When the Spanish conquered it, they built over the existing structures and drained the lake. This inherent instability of building a massive city on a soft, drained lakebed has caused Mexico City to continuously sink, a process still ongoing to this day. Now add about 100 or 200 years of neglect, drop a couple nukes on it, and I imagine Mexico City would probably look like a radioactive bowl of soup. But a bowl of soup would not be very fun to explore. But lucky for us, the one and only time Mexico City is mentioned by our resident Mexican Chad, Raul, he explains that Mexico City was not hit as hard as DC or Bakersfield. Which is good, because there's a lot of really unique and interesting characteristics of Mexico City that would be a shame to not see in the post-apocalypse. But I think the lakebed rising would be inevitable to a certain extent. This can be stylized through light flooding in the streets, underground architecture such as malls being flooded, or under the weight of crumbling infrastructure. If you want to go more extreme, you can even have the roads begin to split open, creating sinkholes. Just think of Silent Hill. Or even have some of the skyscrapers in the downtown area begin to sink into the soil and lean on each other. Just think of The Last of Us and how interesting it was to navigate some of those environments. It could be like the Divide in New Vegas, but on a citywide scale, a vast crumbling web of urbanization. Everything's decayed by water, by time, and molded into this vertical labyrinth. Mexico City also has a subway system. Now, I'm not suggesting we have another sprawling, confusing, and boring metro system in another Fallout game, but rather, if I could be so bold as to suggest, you could use it as a dungeon of sorts. Let me explain. One of my favorite memories in all of my Fallout playthroughs is installing a little old mod called Dust. I don't have time in this video to explain what this mod is. If you know, you know. But I was playing one night, getting my ass kicked by roided out ghouls who can only really die via headshots, when I found myself completely cornered. I didn't have enough ammo to get out of the situation alive, so I did what any rat would do when their back is against the wall. I burrowed. This sewer was my only chance at survival. Little did I know it would be far worse than anything up on the surface. And worst of all, I couldn't get out the way I got in. What would later ensue would be the craziest dungeon crawl I've ever experienced in a Fallout game. I'm not going to spoil it here just in case you want to play it for yourself, but damn, it was a literal descent into madness. And what would normally just be the boring ass sewers of New Vegas was turned into a curated horror experience, which was not only well paced and executed, but it was organic to the world. These sewers are a death trap, and my dumbass, out of desperation, walked right into it. And I'm not the first idiot to do that. It's great world building and diegetic gameplay. That's what I'm suggesting for the metro system of Mexico City. Something cool like that.
This is an automated reminder to wake up from the dull reality of your life and subscribe. Wake up.
Another thing that would make Mexico City an interesting location is the stark contrast between the different districts and their economic disparity. The city's rapid modernization and expansion in the mid-20th century created a mixture of historical and wealthy districts alongside vast, informally developed neighborhoods that often lacked basic amenities. You can still see this stark contrast now in Mexico City, with the most obvious example being the slums on the hills surrounding the city. They literally have a gondola that goes up into these towns because trying to get a bunch of cars, or God forbid a bus, through that labyrinth is often foolish. This is the only practical way to connect these residents to downtown where they work. Fallout has flirted with the idea of depicting the class divide, but hasn't really done anything substantial with the concept. The closest we got was the New Vegas Strip and Freeside. Mexico City would be the perfect place to actually tackle that subject and depict the brutal circumstances that often result from it. But even besides the darker aspects of Mexico City, the uniqueness of the Mexican culture would be a great extension of the Americana depicted in Fallout. Mexico has its own form of Americana-type aesthetic. By the mid-20th century, Mexico was actively forging a new modern national identity. During their post-World War II economic boom, coined the Mexican Miracle, there was a deliberate drive to showcase national pride and demonstrate significant progress. And just like their neighbors up north, this progress was reflected in the art and culture. Mexican architecture, while influenced by the global Art Deco movement that emerged in the 1920s, developed unique characteristics. Architects and designers in Mexico embraced the style's emphasis on streamlined aesthetics, but frequently infused it with elements that resonated with Mexican heritage. This often involved the incorporation of pre-Hispanic iconography and patterns into decorative details, carvings or mosaic work on building facades, or the use of bright colors often used in indigenous architecture. It creates this cool blend between modern metropolis and indigenous heritage that you can't really find in America. Another place you can clearly see Mexican modernism is in the posters of their movies. The golden age of Mexican cinema was a period of prolific film production and widespread cultural influence across the Spanish-speaking world. It's honestly such a sick aesthetic that often parallels the Wild West/Vaquero aesthetic we spoke about earlier. But there's also some noir in there too when depicting city life. Oh, and don't get me started on the music. I mean, I've probably been playing them in the background in this video, but God, I love the music that came out of Mexico in this era. When people think of Mexican music, they often jump to mariachis, dance music, trumpets, all that jazz. And while that music can have its place in a Fallout game, that's not what I'm talking about here. My favorite part of Fallout's licensed music is what it represents thematically in the series. I've talked about this in length in my first Fallout video, but to put it succinctly, the 50s music in Fallout represents the ghost of the old world. And the music of the 1920s through the 1960s is especially proficient at being a ghost because of its haunting sounds and atmosphere. And while mariachi or dance music doesn't really have the same haunting property, plenty of my favorite Mexican music does. Let me introduce you to Mexico's version of the Ink Spots.
Solita, tan lejos de mí.
Los Panchos, a legendary romantic bolero trio formed in 1944. Boleros themselves are a genre of slow-tempo Latin American ballads characterized by their romantic and often melancholic lyrics. This music has such a vibe, man. I can't put it into words, honestly, so instead I'll describe the vibe in a memory. When I was a kid, I'd often sleep over at my grandparents' house, who were first-generation Mexican immigrants. Every time I was there, I would wake up early in the morning, still half asleep, to the smell of my grandma cooking pancakes on the comal and what sounded like the backing track of Heaven playing softly in the distance from my grandpa's CD player. The early morning sun crackling through the window's shade and casting a nice orange hue on the bedroom walls. I'd be half asleep when waking up to all this because it was early for me, so the whole scene would feel so surreal. And even though I was experiencing it in the moment, it felt like a distant memory, or even a dream. And the music captured that feeling perfectly. And now that those times are past, it gives me a unique feeling I can't really describe. This feeling of melancholy and surreal nostalgia is perfect for depicting the ghost of the old world in Fallout. The haunted ghost of old Mexican modernism and its promise, now reduced to rubble, leaving only the evil it harbored within its opulent facade to grow and conquer. And Los Panchos isn't the only artist I think would capture this perfectly. Pedro Infante, David Zaizar, Javier Solis, and so on. But honestly, there's a lot of sick Latin music from the 60s that leaned more contemporary, but I think could fit in a post-apocalyptic Mexico.
¿Cómo no recordarla en cada primavera? Si llega con la brisa, se la lleva la arena. Ella ya me olvidó. Yo no puedo olvidarla.
While not necessarily Mexican, this particular artist is from Argentina. Leonardo Fabio is still a well-known name in Mexico. He's on our radio stations. I mean, Fallout already opened Pandora's box by using John Denver's Country Roads in '76. I think it's finally time to let the music of Fallout evolve a bit. There was this really interesting cultural transition in the late '60s, where you'd have artists who were known for a crooner-style music and vocals, like Leonardo Fabio, start to adopt this psychedelic edge that would become popularized in rock and metal of the '70s. So what would happen is that classic nostalgic sound they had would be given a more contemporary, harder edge, with prominent drums or even distorted instruments. Just listen to Frank Sinatra's The World We Knew, which featured a prominent and dirty electric guitar riff. It creates this really cool hybrid of nostalgia and a dirty industrial sound. Kind of like that old nostalgic world is dying or becoming bitter and angry. I don't know, I think that would fit well in Fallout, where I would imagine the new music that would come out of the wasteland would feature grittier sounds like distortion, while still taking influence from the old world. There's a ton of songs from the late 60s and 70s I can pitch, but this video probably already has a copyright strike already, so I'd rather not get nuked myself.
Oh no, I feel a grievance discharge coming on from your insufferable viewers. About to barf emoji.
It's okay, let it out.
Yeah, that's cute and all bro, but Fallout is American. It's about our wastelands, our lone wanderers, our core damn stars and stripes. Nobody gives a shit about some Archie wasteland. Stick to the law. United States of America flag emoji. Screaming eagle emoji. Screaming eagle emoji. Screaming eagle emoji. Screaming eagle.
Okay, I get it. Well, let me tell you why that's a lobotomite way of thinking. First off, if Fallout is only about America, why does the first game start off with a broadcast in Canada? The US is known to have heavy economic influence in Mexico, so it's not like the American influence in iconography would be completely absent. Poseidon Energy controlled oil refineries in the Mexican states through a subsidiary known as PetroChico. Also, Fallout London has proved you wrong. Fallout can work outside the US. Fallout London is arguably better than some of the Fallouts that take place here in Liberty Land. But if you're an actual post-apocalypse fan, you shouldn't really need convincing on this subject. Mad Max takes place in Australia, that's arguably the most iconic wasteland put to screen. Stalker depicts the radioactive ruins of Ukraine, and Metro is all over Russia. A unique cultural setting isn't a problem for a post-apocalyptic story. Also, last thing, Fallout covering Mexico has already been done, sort of. I mentioned Raul earlier, which, funnily enough, when I first played New Vegas as a kid, I didn't really like Raul. I thought he was a really boring companion. But when I revisited New Vegas when I was older and actually went through his questline, he became my favorite companion in the whole game, and honestly, in the whole franchise. His backstory is badass, but also so horribly tragic that it could be its own movie. Raul Tejada's pre-war life wasn't too dissimilar from the realities of rural living in Mexico I detailed earlier in this video. He lived with his family on the outskirts surrounding Mexico City on their family ranch. After the bombs fell, his family initially helped the stream of refugees who poured in from the ravaged Mexico City. But like everything in the wasteland, the situation would quickly degrade. He and his father were forced to drive off the desperate crowds with their guns. Later that same night, a group of 24 refugees barred the doors of his family's home and set it ablaze. Raul, along with his younger sister, Rafaela, managed to escape through a window, but his parents, grandmother, and 4 other siblings were burned alive. He was forced to kill the men who pursued him and his sister into the night. After their escape, Raul and Rafaela fled to Mexico City, not understanding the full scope of the devastation.
We figured maybe we could find help in Mexico City. We were young. We didn't know what had happened really. We didn't understand about the bombs. I remember how scared Rafaela was. I told her if she came with me, we'd see the Vaqueros. She used to love the rodeo.
They found a city that was a radioactive ruin, overrun with looters and the beginnings of raider tribes. But where else could they go? Raul, suffering from radioactive burns, was forced to scavenge the ruins to survive.
And then, of course, the radiation started to kick in. turning me into this handsome devil you see before you. But there were moments it was almost worth it. I still remember finding that novelty costume shop. I was just looking around for something I could slice up to wrap my burns when I saw the Vaquero outfit hanging on the rack like it hadn't been touched. I took it, not like anybody else needed it, you know, and wore it back to our camp. Rafaela laughed for the first time since the bombs had fallen. For a while, it seemed like we might even survive there until Rafaela.
One day, while scavenging alone for medicine, she was captured by raiders. When she failed to return, Raul went looking for her, only to find that raiders had done unspeakable things to her, to the point she was only identifiable by a little scar on her knee from when she was a little girl. Raul, understandably enraged, returned to the market and shot and killed the raiders responsible.
It led my whole family down. First the ranch, now Rafaela. I was the last Tejada. I guess maybe I went a little crazy then. I took my guns and went back to that market. I didn't have many bullets, but I had enough.
Filled with self-loathing, he left to Mexico City and eventually settled in the ruins of Tucson, Arizona, which the locals called Tucson. There he lived for 75 years as a quiet mechanic and became a guardian of sorts to a prostitute named Claudia, who reminded him of his lost sister. Their fleeting peace was shattered when a gang of raiders, led by a man named Dirty Dave, shot up Claudia's brothel and kidnapped her. Raul pursued them for 3 days, eventually finding their camp with only Claudia in it. A bullet hole in each of her eyes. I think you know what happened next.
I charged into the middle of their camp and started firing. 2 of them were dead before they knew I was there. The other 5, though, they shot the shit out of me. I would have died, I think, if I wasn't so full of rage. I wanted to keep living until they weren't. So I just kept shooting until they were all dead.
Raul is a tragic character, haunted by violence, both as a victim of it and a perpetrator. His story is such a grounded and human way to see the horrors of the wasteland. It's a perfect example of how a post-apocalyptic story, rooted in Mexico, could be so compelling. And that's a potential the Fallout community has already recognized. Fallout Mexico was so close to being a thing with this huge mod project for FMV called Fallout Nuevo Mexico. And honestly, I'm still fuming about its cancellation. It looked like it had nearly everything I wanted in a Fallout Mexico. Everything I've been hyping up throughout this video was in our grasp. It had the perfect selection of music. It had diverse, interesting environments. It had the tone of classic Fallout. It had the horror. What a shame some
Silly billies.
tried to ruin the whole thing. It's a whole controversy that I'm not going to go into here because I respect your brain cells. But yeah, it's fucking stupid. The mod was supposed to take place in Mexico City as well as New Mexico, within the United States, which I think would have given it the best of both worlds when it came to depicting a Western wasteland and Mexican wasteland. Although from the trailers I saw, the main story looked like it was taking some heavy inspiration from the Outer Worlds, which, I'm not sure would have fit well within the scope of the project, especially since that type of corpo bad story has been kind of beaten to death in recent years. It would have taken a very skilled writer to make it interesting. But either way, man, it looks so good. My one wish is someone leaks the maps or something. I'm content with just walking around the environments they created, to be honest. Obviously, I would love for someone to continue the project and execute it, even if it's on a smaller scale. But that's wishful thinking. At least we have Fallout Bakersfield to look forward to.
Hi there, would you like to sign my petition?
No way, you freaking pinko.
Fuck you.
Things aren't all bad, though. We do have Fallout Sonora, after all. It only took a small team of Russian modders to finally give us some Mexican Fallout content. I admittedly haven't played it yet, just cause I haven't dipped my hand into Fallout 2 modding. But I'll get to it eventually. Anyways, that's my pitch. Someone do it, please. You'd be my best friend. And you'll be my bestest friend if you hit that subscribe button. Me and the lamb would greatly appreciate it. Until next time, dear viewers, I will see you in your dreams.
I'll see you.